Hello and welcome back to the final punch around the overlay and the online configuration on OpenLDAP. So up until now, in the different segments that we discussed, we talked about how you could add overlay statically, modifying the slapd.conf file which required a restart of the slapd server. Then we also talked about how you could do it online, that means using a zero downtime configuration by modifying the cn is equal to config branch on the LDAP server. Of course, such a facility exists from the 2.3 version of the OpenLDAP server onwards. But in the last part of the final segment that we discussed, when we added the audit log file, I did something nasty, restarted the LDAP server, and suddenly all the online configuration you made was lost. When we did an LDAP search command on the cn is equal to config branch, all the three entries we had made in the form of a new database, access log, audit log, all of that was lost because the OLC or the online configuration we made was not persisting across the bounds of the OpenLDAP server. So in this segment, I had promised you that I would be revealing to you what needs to be done to make sure that whatever online configuration you perform is going to persist across a restart of the OpenLDAP server. You have to pay close attention to whatever I'm doing. Some of the things that I do here are very specific to the Solaris operating platform, but I'm sure you would be able to translate that knowledge to work on the other operating platforms as well. Now to start with, let me just show you an LDAP search command on the cn is equal to config branch, just to make sure that we understand. Of course, you remember there was a top level administrator by name admin in the cn is equal to config branch, and we had a password for that user which was secret, and then we could search the cn is equal to config branch, which is what we refer to as a base dn. Let's look for the object class is equal to asterisk. Now if you look at the output here, all the data is lost, which is where we stopped the last segment. The three log files, the audit log and the access log that we added using the online configuration, as well as the cn is equal to log database we added, which was holding the access log, all of that is lost. Now to make this permanent, there are a few steps you are expected to perform. So let me go to the directory /etc OpenLDAP, and you would remember this directory to be the one that holds the configuration file of the LDAP server. And in fact, we have been continuously mentioning this. I mean, occasionally we have been mentioning this in the various segments that we discussed so far, the importance of the slapd.conf file. That's the file which is read by the OpenLDAP server when it starts up. But what you need if you would like to have an online configuration persist across an OpenLDAP server is a directory by the name slapd.d. So my first job is to create that directory under the etc OpenLDAP directory. So now where am I standing? I'm standing under the etc OpenLDAP, and under that directory I created slapd.d. The cn is equal to config branch, or the online configuration branches are going to be located under the slapd.d. What it means to say is, from 2.3 version of the OpenLDAP onwards, you have two options: to start your server using the slapd.conf file, or to start your service, the OpenLDAP service, using the configuration files located under the slapd.d. If I navigate to the slapd.d, no prices for guessing there, you don't get to see anything because I just created the directory there. You don't get to see anything at all inside that directory. So slapd.d is empty at this stage. Now if you would like to populate this directory, there are multiple ways of doing it. You can create an LDIF file for the cn is equal to config branch, with all the entries under the cn is equal to config branch, and I think you are somewhat familiar with the LDIF syntax and what needs to be written in the LDIF file to load the data into the DIT, that is the directory information tree. So either you should have a LDIF file located under this slapd.d created by hand so that the server uses that to load the data into the cn is equal to config, or you always have a very easy way of doing it by using the slaptest command. There is a slaptest command that is used to check whether the configuration file is in good shape or not. Now I could use this command to generate the files required under the slapd.d from the slapd.conf. So I'm going to use the slapd.conf as the source file, and I'm going to generate the required files under the slapd.d using the slap test command. You would see that very soon. So let me just mention that I want to check this slapd.conf, and I want to generate the file under the slapd.d directory. So let me just run this command. There you could see a couple of warnings, which of course is indicating to me that I haven't really fine-tuned my OpenLDAP server. There are some things that I need to do to fine-tune my OpenLDAP server, which I have not done. Of course, that's not the intention of the discussion here. So let's ignore that warning for the time being and go back to the slapd.d directory. Last time when I used the ls command under this directory, you would remember it was empty, but now you could see there is an ld file as well as there is a directory cn is equal to config, which is actually going to be used when the LDAP server is going to be started. So if I run the cn is equal to config, you could see that that's actually a directory and the other one is a file. So what we have done here is we have generated the required files under the slapd.d directory by using the slap test. I have to remind you that is not the only way you could generate these files. You could always make use of the LD files by hand. I mean, whatever you see here, you could create it by hand so that the content of that LD file is loaded onto the cn is equal to config branch whenever the server is started. So that's the step number one. Step number two, of course, is that the ownership of this directory, because I created this directory as a root user, you would see that the owner of this directory is root, as well as the group of this directory is also root. We would need to modify that. You will remember there is a user, the very first segments, the sections we talked about, the OpenLDAP user, who is responsible for modifying the files or adding the files into the directory or reading the files for that matter. So I would need to modify the ownership of the slapd.d directory from the root user to the OpenLDAP user. So let me do that. Chown, change the ownership to OpenLDAP user to OpenLDAP group of the directory slapd.d. Now you could now verify that the ownership is changed to OpenLDAP user and OpenLDAP group, as you can see there. So things are in good shape now as far as the ownership of the directory is concerned. So again, I'm mentioning this one more time that there is an option of using the configuration file under the slapd.conf, or you can always keep that under the slapd.d in case if you are referring to a 2.3 version or a 2.4 version of the OpenLDAP server. That's exactly the reason I told you in the last segment that the online configuration is sometimes referred to as slapd.d, because you are expected to have a slapd.d directory in the OpenLDAP server for you to achieve this. Now if you ask me, is slapd.conf file required? Actually no, because whatever configuration is required to start the OpenLDAP server is now under the slapd.d directory. So it is not a bad idea to actually move this to some other name, slapd.conf.backup or something. I think we already have a backup, or maybe you could say OLC backup, just to identify that we took this just before the configuration of the OLC. When I run the command, in fact there is no slapd.conf now. Unfortunately, what happens is now most of the operating system would let you start the slapd daemon now. So what happens is during the process of the startup, the slapd daemon would find the configuration file under the etc OpenLDAP directory. Either it will be the slapd.conf file if it exists, or it is going to be the slapd.d. In fact, if slapd.d exists, it uses that. So it is okay even if you have the slapd.conf file, but just to be on the safe side, making sure that it doesn't use the slapd.conf, I would actually move that. So you have to refer to the operating system manual to figure out how the slapd daemon is started. Okay, now as an example, if I find out, you would remember this is the service, this is the command I've been using to find out the status of the LDAP server. That is very specific to Solaris operating platform. So if you are using a Linux machine, you know how you can find out whether a service is running or not. I would also use a command called svc prop LDAP/server. Now in Solaris operating system, svc prop is going to show me the properties of the service. Now if I list the properties of the service, I would be in a position to know what is the script that is invoked to start the slapd daemon. Okay, so I'm going to run the svc prop command. So if I run the ps -ef grep slapd, you can see the slapd is running and it has been invoked with the user ID, the group OpenLDAP, but you can also see that it is referring to the slapd.conf file. So whichever script is invoking the slapd daemon is in fact pointing, or probably it has a hard-coded the value of slapd.conf. Now if I attempt to restart my server now, there are possibilities that it might go into the maintenance mode, because in my script, the operating system specific script that starts the slapd daemon, it might actually be pointing to the slapd.conf file, which I have moved. Even if I had not moved or renamed that file, it would have picked up the information from that file, but then it would have spoil the whole objective of this exercise, because it never uses the slapd.d directory that we created. And unless it uses the slapd.d directory I created, there is no way we can make sure that the online configuration we perform persists across the bounds of the OpenLDAP server. So we can try that if you want to. Let me just restart my server, and what happens when I restart the server, svcadm restart LDAP/server, it is very likely that this server is going to go into the maintenance mode. I can verify that now. svc is LDAP/server, so it has gone into the maintenance mode. That's very clear, because the script is trying to invoke the slapd daemon by using the slapd.conf file, which now doesn't exist under the etc OpenLDAP directory. So let me just disable this service, disable LDAP/server. Let me just disable this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find out which script in Solaris operating platform invokes the slapd daemon. If I'm able to identify the script that invokes the slapd daemon, I would be able to hack that script, modify the value -f, and specify that slapd.conf is not the file that I want. I want it as a slapd.d. And by the way, there are man pages for both. I can actually specify the man page for slapd.conf. Now this is specific to the etc OpenLDAP slapd.conf, or I have a man page slapd-conf, which is actually it's man slapd slapd-conf. That is not, isn't that the one? Let me verify that. Okay, slapd-config, which actually uses the slapd.d directory. So in case if you stumble on any roadblocks while performing these operations, it's always recommended that you refer to the man pages of these commands, man pages of these files for that matter, so that you get to know what is what. So let's go and find out the properties of the slapd's LDAP server. Now let me remind you, I'm trying to list down the properties of the service to identify the script that is used to invoke the LDAP server. So let me run the properties here. In fact, since I know Solaris operating system, I know that the start script that is used is found under the execc method property. So let me just scroll up and find out the start method. Okay, I can see that this is the property, execc is the property that is used to start the LDAP server. What is it pointing to? It is actually pointing to a script libsvc method LDAP-OL slapd. Now if it leads to confusion, please just keep in mind that you need to just identify what is the script that invokes the slapd daemon in your operating system, and go and refer to the script in case if you have problems there. I'm going to open the script and show you what is there inside the script. So vi libsvc method, under that LDAP or slapd. Let me open that script for you. It seems a con shell script. There you go. You have the configuration file, and look at that. It's actually pointing to slapd.conf. Now I would change that here, and you can also see in the final line the command is being invoked, usr lib slapd with the user ID OpenLDAP with the group ID OpenLDAP, but now it is pointing to the conf underscore file. So let me just remove this and specify slapd.d directory. So that's fine. I mean, the variable name is fine because we're going to use the variable name in the command. One another change that you have to do is to modify this F to capital F. Now that's the other difference you would need to keep in mind when you talk of the slapd script that starts. You would need to point to either the file, which is by using the minus small f etc OpenLDAP slapd.conf, or you would need to point that to the slapd.d directory, which is by using the capital F there. I have done that. I can tell you that even now, if I try to start the service, it is likely to go into the maintenance mode. So those who have observed the script would know why that is. But just to help you understand that, let me find out what is the status of the LDAP server. It is disabled. Let me try to start the LDAP server. It is expected to refer to the slapd.directory for the configuration because that's what we have mentioned in the script. Now we have hard coded that into the script. Let me start it, try to start it, svc as LDAP/server to see if it is enabled. It has still gone into the maintenance mode. Something else had to be done on that script. So it's just not sufficient that you go watch the first few lines of the script and then modify it accordingly, because there are chances that you get annoyed at the fact that after changing also you are getting a maintenance state. So let me disable it again. svc adm disable LDAP/server. Let me go back and edit that file lib svc method. And the name of the method is LDAP OLSLAPD. Now do you see that there is a line in the script that checks for the configuration file? Now it says, okay, check for this configuration file. Actually, we don't have a file anymore. What we have mentioned is a directory. So we have to modify the script a little to reflect the fact that we are actually checking for a directory and not a file, because slapd.d is a directory, not a file. So I modified the script to reflect that fact also. Then I save this, and then let's try enabling that. Let's enable it and see if it comes online. svc as LDAP/server. Okay, now that is still in maintenance, so let me disable that. We will need to figure that out. So vi lib svc method LDAP/OLSLAPD. Okay, let's find out why. The config file is modified. That seems to be fine. slapd.d. We are trying to check for that file, and the -f option is also clear. So maybe we will try and start this manually and see if it comes up. /usr/lib/slapd -u OpenLDAP -g OpenLDAP. I'm running the command -f etc OpenLDAP/slapd.d. Now let's see what happens. ps -ef and grep for slapd. It seems to be running. Let's run an LDAP search command on it. LDAP search -d cn is equal to admin comma cn is equal to config -w secret, and then specify the base d and where I would like to start my search, which is cn is equal to config, and then specify I want to get all the entries, which is object class is equal to star. Okay, now there is a mistake somewhere. It is -b. I missed that, the base dn. Okay, now it seems to be working fine. So what is the problem? There is no problem with the script. Maybe we will do this. svc adm clear LDAP/server. Okay, svc adm enable LDAP/server. svc as LDAP/server. Okay, svc adm clear LDAP/server. svc as LDAP/server. Okay, it's still in maintenance mode, so there is something wrong there. Let's find that out. We will, this time maybe it is already running. Let's go ahead and kill it. Kill the 2046 daemon, which is already running there. OpenLDAP is already running. We don't have it anymore. Let's do a search operation and see. LDAP search, it shouldn't work because it is not running. Now let's svcadm clear LDAP/server and see if it works. svc as LDAP/server. Well, that's online now. So that has helped us understand one more command in the service management facility of the Solaris operating platform, which is clearing the maintenance state. Sometimes when the service goes into the maintenance state, just disabling and enable will not help. So we will use a subcommand called clear to enable and disable it. So a bit of a troubleshooting tips also there, just to understand what is a script which invokes the slapd daemon, and followed by that, what are the options that we use with the slapd command to either invoke the slapd.conf file or slapd.d directory, which is going to be used for the online configuration. Now we have to verify whether whatever you have done is any help for us. We will modify the config branch now using the online configuration. We will create one more database, and then we will restart the slapd server and see whether the online configuration that we made stays there or not. That's the test we will be performing to understand whether slapd.d is working fine or not. First, let me do an LDAP search and verify that it is indeed working fine. Okay, I'm going to add one database here, but before I do that, I will create a directory OpenLDAP access. Okay, that file exists, so I think we can make use of that. You will remember that in one of the segments earlier, we created this directory for the database cn is equal to log. So we're going to make use of the same directory for a new database. As of now, we don't have any additional database in our directory server. We have two databases. One is the config database, which we created, and the second one is the BDB, which is the dc is equal to fetg, dc is equal to com. We had created a third one, which was cn is equal to log, but then because we didn't modify the slapd.d directory, that didn't persist across the restart of the OpenLDAP server. So what I'm going to do now is create that new database. LDAP modify -d cn is equal to admin, cn is equal to config, -w secret. What am I doing? I'm going to create a new database. So OLC database is going to be to BDB. I'm going to use BDB as the backend. CN is equal to config. Under the branch, CN is equal to config. I hope you're able to visualize this. These are steps we performed in the past also. It's the same set of steps we performed in the past, just that whatever we did was lost. Change type is add. Again, we could do this on an LDAP file, but the more I show you this, you probably would get more familiar with this, those who are new to this, and you would feel more comfortable with the LDAP formats and typing it by hand. Now I need to specify object class. What are the object classes? I think OLC database config is one of the object classes. The other object class is OLC BDB config. I hope I'm right with this. We can verify this by scrolling up. We have two object classes, OLC database config, and the second one is the OLC BDB config. Okay, so BDB config. Now we have OLC database, that's going to be to BDB. We also have OLC suffix. What is it that we want? CN is equal to log. That's going to be the suffix. OLC DB directory. I hope this attribute is right. Let's verify that by scrolling up. Yes, OLC DB directory. We created a directory called var OpenLDAP access. So I'm going to use the same thing, var OpenLDAP access. Hit enter twice. Added a new entry. Let's use a Control-C to come out of it. Run the LDAP search command again to see if this database has come up or not. Yes, looks like it has. I now have a new database, which is cn is equal to log, that we created on the fly using the online configuration. Now I am going to do that thing which I did last segment also, restart the LDAP server. But the only difference would be this time when I search the LDAP search command, I do get to see the database that I created online. So the trick of making the online configuration changes persist across an OpenLDAP restart is very simple. Convert your slapd.conf file to the slapd.d directory, and then Make sure that you know the script is in fact using that directory slapd.d instead of the slapd.conf. That might be some work to identify, how the operating system treats or starts the slapd daemon to use either the slapd.conf or the slapd.d directory. So that brings us to a very important section of the OpenLDAP discussion. We talked about the access log, we talked about the audit log. All of these were overlays. We could add these overlays in the file slapd.conf, but required a restart if we did that. So that is why we talked about the OLC, which was a cn is equal to config database we created, and then we plugged in these overlays to the cn is equal to config branch. That could happen online. A restart was not required, but then we realized in the last segment that whatever changes we made was getting lost because we hadn't created this slapd.d directory. So finally we managed to understand how you could make sure that these changes persist across the reboots. I hope all of these discussions have given you a strong foundation on the concept of the overlay as well as the OLC. I'll still recommend you to go and read the official documentation of the OpenLDAP as well as several other resources that are available online to get an in-depth idea on the discussions that we have had. So thank you so much for watching. I'm going to see you soon for the next sections around the OpenLDAP, which again are going to be extremely useful for you in case if you pursue a career in OpenLDAP. See you soon. Thank you.